Doctor Doom is about to become the biggest villain in the MCU, and Marvel has given him basically one movie to get there. Pair that to Thanos, who people say had almost a decade of build-up before Infinity War. So Marvel has obviously rushed Doom, right? I'm not sure they have, because when you actually go back through the Infinity Saga, something becomes pretty obvious. Thanos didn't nearly get as much build-up as we remember. The Infinity Stones did. There's a massive difference between the two. Now, I'm not your daddy, but go and like and subscribe, otherwise Thanos will appear in your dreams tonight and make you rub his chin. Let's start with the obvious problem. Doctor Doom is arriving incredibly late. Avengers Doomsday isn't introducing some smaller villain who Marvel can slowly develop over several movies. This is Doctor Doom, probably the biggest villain Marvel has outside of characters like Thanos and Magneto. Of course, he is going to become one of the central figures of Doomsday and Secret Wars. But where was the setup? We didn't meet Victor Von Doom during Phase 4. There wasn't a mysterious ruler of Latveria appearing in the background of another movie. Reed Richards hadn't spent multiple films warning everyone about him. We haven't watched Doom slowly move pieces around the board. For years, Marvel was building towards Kang. He Who Remains appears in Loki, then we get Kang in Quantumania, more variants in the post-credit scene, Victor Timely, the TVA, the Council of Kangs. Whatever you think about how well that worked, Marvel was clearly building towards something. Then the direction disappeared, and suddenly, Doctor Doom. Not only Doctor Doom, Robert Downey Jr. as Doctor Doom. That's about as a dramatic pivot as you could possibly think of. So I completely understand why people look at this and say Doom hasn't had enough build-up. Because compared to the way we remember Thanos, it feels kind of different. Thanos was teased years before Infinity War. We knew something was coming. We knew there was somebody sitting above villains like Loki and Ronan, and eventually we learned what he wanted. The Infinity Stones. 6 objects scattered throughout the MCU. Once Thanos collected them all, something terrible was going to happen. That's great long-term storytelling. There's just one problem. That's not really Thanos getting developed. Let's go back to 2012. The Avengers end. The heroes defeat Loki. Then we get that post-credit scene. The other tells someone that challenging humanity would be to court death. The figure turns around. Thanos. He smiles. And that's basically it. If you were a comic fan, this was enormous. If you weren't, you probably had absolutely no idea who the purple guy was. I know I didn't at the time. But that's our first Thanos tease. Then 2 years pass. Guardians of the Galaxy finally gives Thanos an actual scene. And this is probably the most meaningful piece of Thanos set up before Infinity War. We learn that Ronan is working with him. Gamora is his adopted daughter, and Nebula is his adopted daughter. He's powerful, and people fear him. But what does Thanos actually do? He sits on a throne. Ronan eventually turns against him, and then Thanos threatens him. And then Thanos disappears from the movie. Ronan is the villain the Guardians actually fight. Another year passes, Avengers Age of Ultron. Thanos appears in the post-credit scene. He puts on the Infinity Gauntlet. Fine, I'll do it myself. Great tease. Iconic moment. But again, that's not character development. We still barely know this guy. We don't know why he wants the stones. We don't know what happened to Titan. We don't know his philosophy. We don't know what he thinks he's saving the universe from. We don't know about his relationship with Gamora beyond what Guardians had shown us. We don't know what the snap is. We don't even really understand what Thanos plans to do once he has all of the stones. Almost everything people remember about Thanos comes from Infinity War, and that's the part I think gets forgotten. This is where the Infinity Saga was genuinely brilliant, because Marvel didn't actually need Thanos walking around for 6 years. They had something else connecting the movies, the Infinity Stones, and Marvel had been introducing them before most audience even knew that's what they were looking at. The Tesseract, the Mind Stone, the Aether, the Orb, the Eye of Agamotto. Different movies could revolve around completely different stories while quietly adding another piece to the same puzzle. Captain America, the First Avenger, could use the Tesseract without Thanos appearing. The Avengers could build an entire plot around Loki's scepter and the Tesseract. Thor, the Dark World, could revolve around the Aether. and Guardians could revolve around the Power Stone. Age of Ultron could introduce the Mind Stone properly, and Doctor Strange could introduce the Time Stone. Most of these movies weren't really building Thanos as a character. They were building the thing Thanos eventually wanted, and that's an important distinction. The Infinity Stones were basically the ultimate MCU MacGuffins. You could put one into almost any story. Different villains could want them for completely different reasons. Different heroes could encounter them without knowing they were part of something bigger. But we, the audience, gradually started putting the pieces together. 6 stones, 1 gauntlet, Thanos wants them. Eventually, he's coming for them. That was the countdown, not Thanos himself. And it created something incredibly useful, anticipation without requiring the villain to constantly appear. We didn't need Thanos fighting Thor in 2013. We didn't need him attacking the Avengers in 2015. We didn't need a Thanos Disney Plus series explaining his childhood. We just needed us to understand that all these incredibly powerful objects were out there, and eventually somebody was going to collect them. So by the time Infinity War begins, the board is already set. Space Stone, Asgard. Mind Stone, Vision. Time Stone, Doctor Strange. The Reality Stone, the Collector. Power Stone, Xandar. Soul Stone, Unknown. Thanos can enter the movie and immediately start knocking them down, and that's why it feels like Thanos had this enormous buildup. Objective had 6 years of buildup. Thanos himself, though, not really. This is the part that really changes the Doom argument for me, though. Infinity War didn't cash in 6 years of Thanos character development. Infinity War did the character development. Think about how quickly that movie establishes him. The opening scene tells you almost everything you need to know about how dangerous he is. Thor has already lost. The Asgardians have been slaughtered. Heimdall dies. Loki tries one last trick and it doesn't even work. Then Hulk attacks him, and this is crucial, Marvel takes one of the physically strongest characters in the MCU and has Thanos beat him with his bare hands. No complicated explanation, no 20-minute origin story. Within the opening minutes of Infinity War, you understand this guy is different. Then the movie starts giving us his character. We learn about Titan. We learn what Thanos believes happened in this world. And we learn why he thinks overpopulation will destroy the universe. We learn that he genuinely believes mass murder is mercy. Then we get Gamora, and suddenly the giant purple villain who sat in a chair for one of his previous appearances has an actual emotional relationship at the center of the movie. He loves her in his own horrific way, and he's willing to sacrifice her anyway. By the time Thanos reaches Wakanda, the audience understands him better than they did after 6 years of teasers. That's why Infinity War works. Thanos isn't just the villain of the movie. In a strange way, he's almost the protagonist. He's the character driving the plot. He has the objective. He's moving from location to location, and he's overcoming obstacles. He's making sacrifices, and ultimately, he wins. Infinity War took a character who had maybe a handful of meaningful scenes across the previous 6 years and turned him into one of the MCU's best villains in a single movie. That is incredibly important when we're talking about Doctor Doom, because maybe the question isn't, has Doom had enough build-up before Doomsday? Maybe the question is, can Doomsday do for Doom what Infinity War did for Thanos? Okay, and this is where I start becoming much less worried. Doctor Doom doesn't really need 6 years of cameos. He needs a great movie. If Doomsday gives Doom enough screen time, if we understand what he wants, why he wants it, what Reed Richards means to him, what makes this version of Victor dangerous, and why the Avengers can't simply stop him, then Marvel can establish Doom incredibly quickly. They've already done it before. The difference is that Doom has one advantage Thanos never had: Robert Downey Jr. The moment RDJ appears, the audience already cares, even if he is masked. Now, that comes with risks we'll get to, but in terms of immediately commanding attention, Marvel couldn't have picked someone with more MCU history. This is the actor audiences spent more than a decade watching as Tony Stark. He's the face most closely associated with the Infinity Saga. And now Marvel is putting that face behind Doctor Doom. You don't need 3 post-credit scenes to make people wonder who he is. The casting itself created the mystery. Why does Doctor Doom look like Tony Stark? Does he actually look like Tony? Is that relevant to this story? And how will the Avengers eventually react? How will Thor react? And most importantly, how will Peter Parker react if he sees that face? These questions exist before Doom has even properly entered the story. That's an incredibly powerful shortcut, I think. But it is still a shortcut. And that's where the risk comes in. Because even though I think people exaggerate Thanos' buildup, Marvel did build something extremely important: expectation. By Infinity War, audiences understood that Infinity Stones mattered. We'd watched characters fight over them for years, knew they were incredibly powerful, and we knew Thanos wanted them. So when Infinity War begins and Thanos already had the Power Stone, there's immediate tension. Then he takes a Space Stone. 2. The movie had basically created a progress bar. Every stone makes him more dangerous. Every stone brings him closer to something terrible. And every time the heroes lose one, the audience understands exactly what it means. Doom doesn't necessarily have that for what we know right now. There's no equivalent set of objects we've been following since Phase 4. There's no 6-piece countdown Marvel has spent years teaching us to understand. The multiverse saga was supposed to have a different connective thread. Kang, variants, incursions, the TVA, different universes colliding. And while that's still partly part of the thing, and some of that can obviously feed directly into Doomsday and Secret Wars, Doom himself hasn't been sitting behind it. At least not from anything we've seen. That is the difference. Marvel doesn't need to explain who Doom is for 6 years. Doomsday does need to make the arrival feel like the culmination of the story we've already been watching. If he simply appears and takes over the entire multiverse saga, that's where it could feel a little rushed. Because Thanos didn't need character development before Infinity War, but his mission had context. Doom needs that same advantage from somewhere, and that's what Doomsday has to establish very quickly. There's also another danger that Thanos never had. When Josh Brolin appeared as Thanos, audiences saw Thanos. When Robert Downey Jr. appears as Doctor Doom, audiences are going to see Tony Stark. Maybe, eventually. At least, initially. And Marvel knows that. There's absolutely no way you cast RDJ in the role without understanding what his face means to the audience. That's probably part of the point. But Marvel does have to be careful, because Doctor Doom cannot feel just like evil Iron Man. He can't just be, what if Tony Stark went bad? Victor Von Doom deserves to have more than that. His arrogance, his obsession with Reed Richards, his relationship with Latveria, his belief that he genuinely knows what's best for everyone. The combination of science and magic, that's what makes Doom interesting. RDJ gets people through the door. But once they're there, Marvel still has to make them believe they're watching Doctor Doom. And that's why the lack of previous Doom appearances might actually help. There's no MCU version audiences have already formed an opinion about. Doom can arrive fully formed. The question is whether Marvel give him enough room to actually be Doom before Secret Wars starts asking him to carry the entire story. So the question is, has Marvel rushed Doctor Doom? Yes. And no. If we're comparing appearances, absolutely. Thanos was introduced 6 years before Infinity War. Doom is arriving much closer to the movie when he's expected to become a major threat. But I don't think that comparison tells the full story, because Thanos did not get 6 years of meaningful character development. He got teasers, a post-credit appearance, a supporting role in Guardians of the Galaxy, another post-credit appearance. Then Infinity War did almost all of the heavy lifting. The thing Marvel spent years building really wasn't Thanos. It was the Infinity Stones. They were the connective tissue. They gave Thanos a mission audiences already understood before he properly started it. And that's the challenge Doctor Doom actually faces. Doom doesn't need 6 years. He doesn't even need 5 movies. He definitely doesn't need a Disney Plus series. He doesn't even necessarily need an origin story. He needs Doomsday to make us understand him. Fast. What does he want? Why does he want it? Why is this person capable of threatening this entire universe? And why should we care about Victor Von Doom beyond the fact that Robert Downey Jr. is playing him? If Doomsday answers those questions properly, I don't think the lack of build-up matters. Infinity War proved that one great movie can turn a barely developed villain into the center of the entire MCU. But Marvel has lost the advantage it had with Thanos. There's no Infinity Stone countdown this time. No six MacGuffins spread across years of movies gradually pointing towards Doom. So Doomsday has more work to do. And that's why I'm not convinced Doom is doomed because Marvel introduced him late. I'm convinced the pressure on Doomsday is enormous because Marvel doesn't have 6 years to make us care about Doctor Doom. They have one movie. The good news though, that's basically all Thanos needed too. But what do you guys think? Did Thanos really have a decade of build-up? Or have we confused the build-up of the Infinity Stones with the build-up of Thanos himself? If Infinity War could establish Thanos in one movie, can Doomsday do the same thing for Doctor Doom? Let me know down below. And until next time, guys, this has been LFG's. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.
W's in the shot.